Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Jody Sternoff-Cohen. Jody's a best-selling author, award-winning journalist, functional practitioner, and founder of Vibrant Blue Oils, where she has combined her training in nutritional therapy and aromatherapy to create unique proprietary blends of organic and well-crafted essential oils. She has helped over 70,000 clients heal from brain-related challenges, including anxiety, insomnia, and autoimmunity. Her website, vibrantblueoils.com, is visited by over 500,000 natural health seekers every year, and she has rapidly become a top resource for essential oils education on the internet today. Her first book, Healing with Essential Oils, is available on Amazon.com, and her new book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body, will be released today. Welcome, Jody. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Thank you for doing this. I wish we were in person. I'm normally recording this in Capitol Hill, and it would be way more fun to be in person, but at least I get to see you on Zoom.
I know. I do miss in person.
I know. Soon enough.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start with some rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. What word best describes you according to your friends?
They think I'm resilient.
Well, I would say yes. Yes, exclamation point. Mountains or ocean?
Oh gosh, both. I love both. And I see you at both. I see you in Maui and I see you at Whistler.
Yeah, I like both. I think I would have to say ocean, though, if it was like ultimately I'm ocean. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Total introvert.
And what is something that you have read, seen, or listened to that you most frequently recommend to others?
Oh, that's a great question.
Besides your book, which we're hopefully recommending.
I love Glennon Doyle. I love how honest and raw she is.
I do too. It's so funny because I read Untamed at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2020, and I've had a few people on the podcast who have said Untamed, and I'm like, I gotta say, couldn't agree more. Like, it was so powerful. Love. And I love Brene Brown. Do you like Brene Brown?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So who is a person that you would most like to share a meal with?
Living or dead?
Either.
At this point, gosh, anyone out of quarantine. I admire Gwyneth Paltrow. I kind of like how she's grown her business and how she balances things.
Yeah. It's funny because I follow her, and right now she's on some sort of crazy intermittent fasting fast, and I'm on this crazy fast right now. So obviously, well, you and I know that we've known each other our whole lives. So you grew up here in Seattle, correct?
Yes, very close to you.
Yes, definitely. And who would you say, when you were younger, you most kind of looked up to?
You know, I don't know if you remember Nicole Condit. I really loved her mom. She was really kind of a critical thinker. She was always, she got like a tiny little Datsun when everyone else had the big station wagon, and we'd all cram in there, often in the trunk. And she just was kind of brave and unconventional.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, you need to spend more time with my mom. My mom was definitely unconventional and fun.
And brave. Yes, that's true.
Brave,
she always has been.
And what did you think that when we're little, we always have ideas about what we kind of want to be when we grow up. What were you thinking you'd want to pursue?
It's so funny because my daughter is 16 and so she's thinking about colleges and what her major should be. I don't know that I totally knew. I knew what I was good at and what I got praised for. And so I think I kind of went in that direction. Like I was always a good writer and people seem to, but I really had no clue, and it wasn't, we can get into this more, but I didn't have this kind of linear path. I just kept following what seemed fun.
Well, completely. And that's how it was back in the day. I
Yeah.
mean, how many people would you say that we knew that actually knew? Probably none. I mean, maybe like the doctor or the veterinarian or someone who knew they wanted to join the military or something. But most of us were just kind of like, oh, that school sounds cool because, my friend's going there. Like, how did you
Yes.
decide on Indiana?
Oh my goodness. We used to go to Maui when you were there, and there was a whole Chicago contingent that was there, and they all went to Indiana. And so I had no idea. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I applied to a bunch of Midwestern schools, and my dad took me out to visit. And I graduated high school in 1987 when Indiana basketball was doing really well. And one of my Maui friends said, "Oh, come, I'm on the student athletic board. I'll get you tickets." And my dad was like, "I'm there,"
You're
because he
like done
loves.
and done.
Yeah,
That's
and
so
then
funny.
it's this unbelievably beautiful campus. It's really pretty, and I had looked at WashU and Northwestern before that were also pretty, but the people were pretty serious. It didn't strike me as fun. And we went to IU, and my friend took me out, and we went to all these parties. I'm like, this place is fun.
And was it like
Oh,
tons of fun?
so fun, so fun. And it's interesting because then I went on and went to Columbia, which New York is such a distraction that I was
Hmm.
almost grateful. There's really nothing to do in Bloomington, Indiana, except for go to class and maybe go to the local bars with your friends. So it really wasn't that distracting.
Did you go to New York right out of college?
No, I went to, so this is a funny story. I graduated and didn't have a job. And my mother said, "You have until September to find a job, at which point I will find one for you and you probably won't like it." So I was very motivated, and I was sending resumes to New York. I thought I wanted to work in like PR or advertising. And my college boyfriend was doing a summer internship in DC. So I figured if I had interviews, my parents would pay for the plane ride from New York to DC so I could visit him. So I just wrote to, our congressman and the two senators. And of course, at that time, no one from Seattle really went to DC. So I got the interviews and I wound up getting all the jobs. Just,
Oh,
I
that's
think,
awesome.
because they wanted a constituent. So I had no idea. I thought it was really easy to get a job in the US Senate.
Yeah, I saw that you worked in politics for a while. Did you like that? Like, how was it versus how you thought it was going to be?
I thought I was going to really be helping people. I thought that it was going to be like some legislation that really made a difference in the world. And part of it was that, but the thing that was hard was kind of the sharp elbow piece, like Bush was in office when I was there. So we intentionally crafted a terrible education bill so that Bush would veto it and we could say, "Oh, Bush vetoed education." And that didn't feel like it was making the world a better place. So I struggled with that.
Yeah. How long did you work in politics? So it was like a couple years.
Well, I moved to DC in August of 91, and I worked in politics until about 93. So January of 93. And then I had been journalism poli-sci undergrad. So I got a job as a journalist in DC,
Hmm.
which, that was actually very fun.
Well, I'm sure. So when you're working as a writer and journalist and working in politics, you don't necessarily need an MBA. Like, what made you decide to go back and get an MBA?
Well, see, this is a good story too. There was a lobbyist when I was in the Senate who I thought was cute. And I knew he was getting an MBA and I wanted an excuse to go to lunch with him. So I asked him about it. And we went out to lunch. And as he was talking about it, I realized, oh gosh, that actually, I think I would like that because, in DC, everyone, they're very ambitious. They're either there for law school for 3 years or they're working for 3 years and then they're going to go get their advanced degree. And I bizarrely tested well in math always, like so much better than English. And so I knew, oh, I'll do really well on the GMAT because it's math. And the marketing actually sounds like something I would enjoy. So once I kind of heard about it, I was like, oh, I would like that. And I did.
I love that you're just like casually like, oh, I might just want to go get an MBA. And then it ends up being Columbia of all schools. It's a really competitive program.
It
Like, it's
is.
crazy. And then you
Yeah,
lived in New York after that?
I did. Yeah, I graduated. And, a lot of the people that go to Columbia are from New York. So they're super well connected. I mean, you were there when I was there. It was so hard to get an apartment. But a lot of my friends like, oh, I got engaged. So you can just have my apartment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I finished business school in 96 when .com. There was a .com party every night. Like it was so easy to get a job just because there were so many opportunities opening it up.
Yeah. And at what point in this whole journey did you meet your husband? Was that the cute guy that was the MBA story, or is that someone else?
No, that was, I actually met him hiking to Machu Picchu mountains, Peru. Yeah. A friend of mine had basically gone straight to Microsoft after college, and was kind of there at the right time. So made her millions before she turned 30, and she had never traveled. And I would travel every chance I got. So she's like, oh, you're a good traveler. Let's go somewhere. And I think Noah Tratt's parents had just gotten back from Peru. And I was like, I really want to go to Peru. So we did. And my ex-husband was on the trip, and they'd actually gone to Brown together. So it was pretty random, but yeah.
That is, I always love hearing these stories. It's like you said, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think she was in that movie Sliding Doors, but I always think about that. Like, what if you hadn't gone on that trip? I'm like, how just like life works in that way that, all these intersections of people. And
Exactly.
So I remember you had this like crazy long, awesome career in media and advertising in New York.
Yeah.
And then like, what brought you back to Seattle?
Microsoft, actually. It was funny. I wanted to quit because before we got married, we wanted to do some traveling, and I went in to kind of give my resignation, and my boss was like, we're going to lose headcount, and if you quit, we're going to lose one more headcount. So can you hang on a few months longer, before you quit? And I said, yes, but only if you let me. There were a couple of projects that I really thought needed to get done that no one was doing. So it was like, only if you let me do these specific projects, because I really think that would be quite helpful. And so he agreed. And through those projects, I wound up meeting the head of a marketing department in Seattle, who was like, you should, we were planning to move to Seattle anyway. So she basically recruited me. So, got married, moved to Seattle.
How did you feel about that whole move? Because, I think that for me, I always thought I would move back to Seattle from New York, but then being gone for so long, it was like very much not something that I was thinking was actually going to happen until the market crashed in 2009. For me, like that was more the like, okay, we need to do something, because New York was kind of getting ridiculously expensive and unrealistic with 2 kids.
See, I knew that we were getting married and I wanted to have kids, and I wanted to be close to my mother, and also the whole real estate. I mean, we were in like a 1-bedroom apartment, and we moved here and bought, it felt like a mansion. Like I couldn't believe how much space. The thing that was hard for me is driving, because I hadn't lived in a city where I would walk everywhere. And Seattle's not really a walk everywhere city.
Right. So you moved back here, you start working for Microsoft. Which department were you in at Microsoft?
Well, that's the funny thing. I started, and it was kind of this like corporate across the board, like they were doing kind of marketing programs across the board. And it basically, that got shut down like shortly after I started, and they give you like whatever the 60 days to interview internally. But I didn't actually like the commute, the driving from Queen Anne to Redmond. Yeah. And so Avenue A, Lee Sherman, who we grew up with, was working there. So I wound up off-ramping to Avenue A and doing online advertising, which was actually fabulous. It was really fun.
Oh yeah, super cool. Yeah. I can't remember someone was just on the podcast that worked at Avenue A, and now I'm of course freaking, it's going to bug me. I'll think of it and I'll text you after. That's so funny.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So you get married, you've got your 2 kids here in Seattle, and you're raising them, you're working full time, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what intersections of life led you to make such a pivot to get into essential oils and kind of wellness?
Yeah, I think, I kind of look at my life like a roller coaster. I hit a rock bottom, I figure out how to crawl back up, and then another one comes. So my daughter was born in 2004, and she was ridiculously easy, like still to this day, the easiest child I've ever encountered. And I just assumed that I was like this great mom, like, oh, I don't know what's everyone else struggling with. So Max was born 22 months later, and he was not easy. Like you'd have the baby proofers come and they'd say like, oh, maybe you should lock the oven because your kid might crawl inside. And you're like, what kid crawls in the oven? Like, that's ridiculous. Well, Max crawled in the oven. He
He was
was,
that kid. Yeah.
he was that.
Did he have like ADD, or was he just like tactile? Like I have some friends who have those boys, and I have a boy that's mellow. I'm like, my boy never even climbed over the couch. But a lot of boys just are very
Yeah.
physical.
He was a total sensory seeker, no impulse control. He was probably ADD. I mean, it's funny. I actually had all these assessments set up for him because he was about to enter seventh grade, and then he got in a car accident. So I had to unravel everything. But yeah, I'm sure he was. But what got me into nutrition was we were actually, I think, at a birthday party at the zoo, and he was being really well behaved. And Alex Ehrlich was like, "Oh my gosh, he's being so well behaved today!" And it's like, "Yes, yay!" And then another mom passed out a Ritz cracker. He ate it and literally like took off. We were by the carousel. He started making a beeline towards the Jaguar. So I just sprint after him, grab him, bring him back. And she said, "That's interesting that he, changed after eating something. My brother was on Ritalin his whole life, and it turned out he was allergic to weird foods. You should take him to a nutritionist." And I thought, well, that's easy enough. I've tried everything else. So I took him to a nutritionist, and, I took every parenting class I could think of, all the uh-oh songs, nothing worked. We used to be like, "Look at my nose." He couldn't look at our nose. The nutritionist said he's very sensitive to corn, soy, and dairy. Take that out of his diet. I thought, okay. The next day he could look at our nose. And that was really mind blowing, because for anyone who's ever had, that kid who does those things, it's exhausting. And you wonder, is it my parenting? Am I a terrible mother? Like, is there a better way to reach them? And to realize, like, oh my goodness, for whatever reason, those chemicals in his brain were not a fit. And when I shift the chemicals, it's so much easier for him to show up as his best self. I was like, I have to learn more. Like, that never occurred to me.
So you started studying nutrition?
Yeah, there was actually a program, Nutritional Therapy Association, and it actually met like once a month, the entire weekend on Capitol Hill at Seattle Central. So I enrolled in that program and got kind of certified, and was trying to work with other moms and, help them with their kind of ADD kids in a natural way. And then, the next shoe dropped. So.
Well, and so the next shoe being, because, obviously you and I are in each other's lives, but the listeners on the podcast are not in your life, or maybe some of them are. Hopefully our moms are listening.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, my mom.
Hi, Shelly.
So yeah, tell us what led you to taking it to the next level of even essential oils and just all the different things that your roller coaster has taken you through.
Yeah. I mean, like you, I was playing mostly with supplements. Often I would forget to take them. And then my husband we kind of figured out he was bipolar after my daughter was born. He got really manic. We thought we addressed it. He was taking the right remedies at the time. Then my son was born, and he kind of flipped in the other direction and was more depressed. And that story of the frog in the boiling water, like you just kind of keep functioning. By the time Carly was 7 and Max was 5, he was in pretty bad shape. And it became clear that I might lose him. He might die on my watch. Unfortunately, mutual friends stepped in and said, this is above your pay grade. There are facilities where you can check him in, a residential treatment facility, where they can help him, and he's going to be safe, and it's not your responsibility. So we found one in Texas. It's called Menninger. Actually, Rabbi Wiener was the one who recommended it. And his sister came up from San Francisco and helped move him down. And the minute that I knew he was safe and it wasn't my job to keep him alive, it was like I had crossed the finish line for a 5-year marathon. And I could barely function. I couldn't get out of bed. I mean, I had to, because they were 5 and 7. So I'd get up, I'd make them breakfast, I'd pack their lunch, I'd drive them to school, I'd come home, I'd crawl back into bed and set the alarm for pickup, pick them up. And it was just, every day was survival, like just making it through the day. But I knew that my adrenals were probably exhausted. I knew what supplements I was supposed to be taking. I was actually taking them, and it wasn't working. Nothing was helping. And a friend, fortunately, was in the oil world, and I had helped her with a big event. She came by with a box of probably 40 oils and said, when you're high stress, your body releases cortisol, and that causes kind of chronic inflammation, including in your gut. So when your gut's really inflamed, it really doesn't matter if you're taking the right remedies, it's probably not getting into your system. Oils can actually work through the skin and get into the blood that way. You can smell them. It's just a different thing to try. And I thought, why not? I have to try something, and nothing seems to be working. So, because I had been working with kind of squirmy, wormy kids, I learned this system called muscle testing, which is just, it's weird, but it works. It's kind
I've
of
done
a
muscle
way.
testing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I muscle tested the box, like for the adrenals. I got 5 oils. I felt confused. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, maybe, they're liquid. I can combine them. Didn't know anything about oils. Went in the kitchen, grabbed a shot glass, kind of made my first blend. But I knew where the adrenals were in the body. So I put them on the low back. And it was kind of the most profound moment of my life. Like, I'm sure you've had moments in Maui where you feel like you're drowning, like the tide pulls you out and you're like, wait a minute, how come I can't get back to shore? And then you finally do. And you take that first breath and you're like, oh, I'm not dead. I was like, oh my God, I could go running. I could go clean the house. Laundry is such an experience. You have to wash it, then put it away. And anyway, I did more that day than I had probably in the past month. And I thought, okay, that was a win. I'm going to keep doing that. And, when you're that kind of, when your energy is that messed up, it impacts your sleep too. So it's usually that, you're dragging through the day and then at night you're super tired, but you can't fall asleep. So as I was kind of clock watching, I thought, well, maybe I can make something for sleep. So I made my second blend, and I just kept making things up as I was going that seemed to help. And then when I started kind of feeling like myself again, all my friends are like, all right, what'd you do? You have to share. So I was literally giving them like little samples, and they were like, this works for me. It tests well for all my clients. You should do something with this. And I thought, well, this is so obvious. I'm sure someone is. So I finally went online and looked, and no one was really looking at oil blends kind of through the lens of balancing organs and regions of the brain. And the way they described it, it was so super complicated. I would have felt totally unqualified and never tried it. So the Nutritional Therapy Association was having an event, and it was like $200 to be a vendor, and I knew how to market. So I'm like, all right, well, like show up, proof of concept. We made, I think, 100 kits because we knew there were like 200 people there. And we sold out pretty much the first day. People were like, oh, we've wanted to do oils. It felt confusing. We didn't really get it. I like that you made it simple. And so I was like, oh, I guess we're onto something. So I hired someone to build a website. I would write blogs, when the kids were in school, and I would fill orders at night, and people kind of, Dr. Google found me. At a certain point, I hired some friends to help me with fulfillment, and it just kind of kept growing without really a lot of effort and trying.
That's amazing. And so when you say you made it simple, just that the branding would be like sleep, or stress, like that type of branding, or versus, because somebody might not know that like lavender is good for this, or
exactly,
cinnamon's good for that. So interesting. And so how did you even know how to physically mix? You just mix them in your kitchen? You didn't have a lab or anything?
So there's actually a essential oil celebrity. His name is Jim Harrison, who lives on Queen Anne and teaches at Bastyr. So I signed up for the Bastyr course and kind of learned from the renowned expert how to do it. Yeah, and I basically converted my garage I had it redone and turned it into kind of like my office, and I was doing it myself in the beginning. And then obviously when you scale, I outsourced it to someone who used to work for Young Living, and
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so how do you go about sourcing the oil, like the contents that go into the bottles? Where do you even find that? And how do you make sure that it's, organic and not without chemicals?
Yeah. So he actually had a lot of relationships, and I was working with him early on. So you really need to, I mean, it's really important because where it's grown matters so much. Like, you've lived in Seattle and New York, and they're both famous for apples, but the apples are very different. Washington State apples and New York apples are not one and the same. So kind of the soil that it's grown in, the amount of sunlight, the amount of moisture in the air, that really impacts it. So like helichrysum, for example, you have to source that from Corsica. You can get it from other places, but it's not as good. Blue tansy comes from Morocco. So he had all the pre-existing relationships. And then my criteria was it has to be organic, but every batch that we get in, we test and we make sure there's no pesticides, no adulterants, nothing synthetic.
And so do you get to travel? I mean, I guess pre-pandemic, were you traveling to some of these exotic places to test and source oils?
Pre-pandemic, yes. Yeah,
That's
we'll
amazing.
see. I will be excited to get on a international flight again.
I'm sure. And so I'm sure that it's a small world, like the oil industry, how many people are in, but it seems like it's probably grown a lot in the past 10 years. And so how do you stand apart from the competition?
I'm really the only one who's doing kind of proprietary blends that are like, I label it, adrenal, pancreas, liver, gallbladder. I'm really looking at it more from a clinical perspective of how does this work to balance the organs in the body. Basically when you go to your practitioner, what they're doing is they're looking at how do we put you in balance. Like if your kids, Max used to love to make marble ramps, and if it's kind of not right, the marble won't roll. So that's basically like your body. If everything's kind of working properly, you should have energy throughout the day. You should sleep well at night. Your brain function should work. So it's just helping to get people kind of in optimal balance. And you can do that with oils basically to reboot your system.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And how do you know when you're in balance? Like, if I've gotten all this blood work done just because I feel like it's a privilege to be able to even pay for it, right? To go to find a doctor that will do that. But the average person is not necessarily has the time or resources or even know-how to try to figure out if they're in balance.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest question is, are you sleeping? Is it hard to fall asleep? Do you stay asleep or do you wake up in the middle of the night? If you have no problem falling asleep, you sleep through the night and you wake up feeling rested, then sleep, is good for you. That's a good thing. The next thing is kind of like stress. Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel anxious? Does your stomach feel fluttering? Do you go to the bathroom too often or not at all? How is kind of your stress and your digestion? If you eat something, does your stomach kind of hurt? Do you feel bloated? Do you kind of feel that acid reflux? Anything that kind of feels less optimal, like that's a concern. With toxicity, are you do you have itchy skin or any kind of breakout or skin eruption? Do you get motion sickness when you're driving?
Right. It's interesting because I went on the site to try to figure out like which oil would be best for me. And I did the assessment. And so when it was like breaking it down at first, they were like, okay, any issues around sleep or stress, digestion, inflammation, detoxification, blood sugar. And I was like, all. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm all. And so I was like, can I take all? And then I read that it was like less is more. So I was like, okay, that's good to know, because knowing my personality, I'm like, give me the whole kit and caboodle. But then I took the assessment and it said that I'm stressed, which to me is like, then every single human on the planet should probably be using the oils, because all of the things you mentioned, like the only two I didn't have was like acid reflux or something. I don't have that. But like, people have things. There's stress, there's anxiety, there's sleep. Or maybe it's just us, I was shocked to see
everyone.
I would imagine that everybody could use, this type of balancing. And so do you feel, I know that you mentioned earlier that Max was in a car accident and I know that he died from the car accident. And so you were using the oils at the time. And I remember seeing you and you gave me a little bit of oil and it actually was amazing. I don't know if you remember.
Was it at services at Temple?
Yeah. And I was like, they were very calming for me. Like it was amazing. And so did the oils help you get through such an incredible tragedy? There's like the most unnatural thing as a mother to lose a child. Like I can't imagine.
It was horrible. And, it's interesting because I feel like I was well resourced going in, but, you know, I had never, for me, grief, it was like a wave. Like it would wake me up in the middle of the night and my chest would hurt. Like grief is actually associated in Chinese medicine with the lungs. And I could feel that. And it was, if you've ever woken up like a Charlie horse, and you kind of have to get up and stand on it and then it fixes it. I was like, oh my God, this is so intense. Like I thought it might kill me. But then I'm like, all right, I'm just going to try, trial error. So the first one I tried actually was we have a lung remedy and that worked really well. And it really, it was like standing up on the Charlie horse and it's better. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm not going to stop, these waves from coming, but I'm going to work through them. Like that's actually, it's a little bit weird to get into, but emotions kind of impact our health, mostly because we don't really know how to feel them. So, big girls don't cry, stiff upper lip, we just suppress. When you suppress them, then they kind of become stagnant. So oils can help you, with grief. If you can actually release your grief, if you can cry, if you can move through it, that helps. The other big aha that I had was I was an anxious wreck to begin with. Like so much of my personality was kind of figuring out how to work around my anxiety. Like I would never wait to the last minute to turn in a paper, mostly because I would be so anxious. So the whole perfectionist program and overachiever, that was really a workaround for my anxiety. But, all of a sudden Max died and it's like the dam completely broke. And what you were talking about earlier, there's a certain level of stress that, we can't give up. Like if someone just says, oh, you're stressed, I used to think, what am I going to do? Like go to yoga all day? Like my kids still need to be driven and fed and, the house needs to be clean. But what I realized is that there's kind of the external stress and then there's how you respond to it. Mm-hmm. And there are ways that you can control your physiological response. And that felt like, if you've ever heard that Viktor Frankl quote, between the stimulants and the response, there is a pause. And in that pause lies the power. There is a way to kind of pause your nervous system so that when you are having an anxiety attack or feel like you might, explode or feel completely overwhelmed, or, you're on a tight deadline and your kid asks you a really easy question, but somehow you lose your temper and you don't mean to. There's a way to kind of pause that so that doesn't happen. And that's really, this is, if your listeners, hear nothing else, I hope they hear this. So your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system controls your automatic functions. It has two gears: the gas pedal, which is when you're overwhelmed and in danger, and the brake, which is called your parasympathetic nervous system. It is
this like the fight or flight?
Fight or flight, yes. Fight or flight is sympathetic. Rest and digest is parasympathetic. The on-off switch, literally the gear shift, like on your bike, between those states is the longest nerve in the body most people have never heard of. It's called your vagus nerve. It connects your brain to your body to the brain. It starts at the back of the neck, splits, and is most accessible kind of right behind the earlobe. It also winds through your throat, your lung, your heart. Every time you, like, deep breathing basically is activating your vagus nerve and stimulating parasympathetic. So that's why you always feel better in Shavasana than at the beginning of yoga. But right around when I started getting into oils, I was like, how do I activate parasympathetic? Oh, it must be relaxing. It must be like lavender or chamomile. But then this research came out. There was a neuroscientist out of New York named Kevin Tracy who was playing with like surgically implanting pacemaker-like devices kind of behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone. And he was using that to stimulate the vagus nerve. And it was so successful that the FDA approved it for epilepsy, depression, and migraines. And when I saw that, I was like, stimulate? Oh my God, oils are so stimulating. Like some oils like clove or oregano, thyme, if you put them on your arm, it will turn red, it will feel hot. I'm like, I bet you could use a stimulatory oil to kind of acupuncture point, trigger that vagus nerve. And that was the biggest aha moment that you
wow.
Yeah. basically it's like, there are times when you're driving, someone cuts you off and you're like, whatever, who cares? It's a sunny day. Other days, 4-letter words are flying out of the mouth. The only difference in that moment is you and your resilience. And the more you can gear shift into parasympathetic, the more you can show up as kind of you're resilient, you're good, it doesn't really matter what else is going on. You're kind of your best self, which helps in business, it helps in relationships, it helps with your health.
Helps with parenting, like the example that you gave. I'm like, I think that was me like 2 hours ago. I got interrupted and I like short-tempered because I had a deadline. This is fascinating. Wow.
And that was actually the biggest thing with Max because, he obviously was killed. There were other boys, other families involved. There was a lot coming at me over which I had zero control. But when I was able to kind of activate my parasympathetic nervous system, it's interesting. Sympathetic fight or flight shuts down everything not relevant to survival. So like blood flow is routed away from digestion to your arms and legs, your breathing increases so you get more oxygen in, but it changes your focus. Your pupils, the black part of your eyes, actually get really big like saucers. It's called selective attention. And what it means is, if you could kind of contemplate everything, you could die because you can't really be taking it all in when you're in danger. You really have to just hyper focus on the next thing to keep you alive. So that means that your problem solving skills, your ability to make choices and stay calm totally shuts down. So when you activate your parasympathetic state, you basically, the pupils shrink up, your access to creative thinking, like if something happens, you get an email that's really triggering and upsetting. Instead of responding right away, you take a pause, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and then you can look at it again and either say like, oh, I can see their point, but I disagree with this, or gosh, it looks like we need more information. You're able to really show up as kind of your most diplomatic version of yourself, which does so much more for your business.
Yeah. For your business, for yourself, for your relationships, all of it. I love it. And so tell me about your routine for yourself with oils. Like which oils do you access the most? I know you said less is more. So are there kind of the grand poobah, this is the holy grail one or two or three?
The grand poobah that Fonzie would be using. Yeah. Yeah. We call it parasympathetic. It's a combination of clove and lime. In the book, I actually give the entire recipe, but I do that upon waking. I'm a morning exerciser, actually, because when I lived in DC, you never knew when the Senate would get out of session. And I hated, I used to exercise after work and you never knew if after work was 2 a.m. So I was exercising after work and my boyfriend got mad at me because DC was scary and people were getting mugged. So I started exercising in the morning. So I still do that. So I use my parasympathetic blend, our adrenal blend, which is good for energy. And then the main thing, like, for your audience, people that might be, over 30, movement is really what keeps you healthy because movement makes the lymph pump. And it means that good things like oxygen and blood sugar get to the brain and bad things like waste get out. And oils can actually help with movement. So I have a lymph oil and a circulation oil that I like to use, before I exercise.
Wow. Okay. So I feel like we just talked about 4 or 5 oils. So 4 oils. So those are the 4. Then do you use a different set at night or are you using them throughout the day?
I'm using them. I use parasympathetic throughout the day. On election night, I think I used it every 5 seconds, Yeah. And then the other ones that I sometimes use at night, my sleep issue is night waking. I tend to wake up around 3 or 4 in the morning. And that is when your detoxification organs, your liver and your gallbladder are the most active. And so if, they're kind of overwhelmed, it wakes you up. Then you might have to go to the bathroom because toxins are being pushed out your kidneys instead. So I use a blend of liver and gallbladder kind of over my liver, which is right under your right breast before bed. And when I do that, I don't wake up in the middle of the night.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. And so what if someone's anxious flying and they want to take an oil with them on the plane, a little baby one?
Yep. Well, the cool thing about anxiety, there's actually a whole branch of chiropractic called functional neurology. And what they're doing, the brain isn't just one organ. It's got different regions, different hemispheres that do different things. So any kind of anxiety attack is your right forehead, your right frontal lobe that's overactive. So the way functional neurologists balance it is they just use your right thumb, plug right nostril, smell anything. It doesn't matter what oil, whatever smells good to you, through your left nostril. That will then stimulate your left forehead, balance the hemispheres, and the anxiety goes away immediately.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Done
Yeah.
and done. So right hand over right thumb over right nostril,
Yeah.
sniffing through your left nostril.
Yeah.
Any oil.
Any oil, whatever smells good to you. I'm really not a believer that if it smells putrid, you should enjoy it. I think if you don't like it, don't take it.
But if I'm looking at them, like, what am I looking for to see? Obviously, I'm going to buy them from you. This was a gift. But if I'm just receiving them, like, how do I make sure that they're actually doing something for me and they're healthy?
Try to buy organic when you can, but some things, like for anyone who's ever had a garden, there's mint grows like weeds. There's really no need that you need to put pesticides on it because it's going to grow anyway. And I would just say, if you're new to oils and you really, don't know where to start, citrus is really good for any kind of anxiety, depression. It's very calming. Just go to Whole Foods or any place that has it. Just smell and pick the one that you like the best. Just start there.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point for baths, like everyone says lavender for sleep. It's a little bit like Benadryl. Sometimes it works, sometimes it makes you more hyper. But the way it works best is when you add it to an Epsom salt bath. So 2 cups Epsom salt, 1 cup baking soda. Put the 3 drops of lavender in the salt before you add the water. Use your bathtub as a mixing bowl because then the oil won't float on the top.
That's helpful. And so tell me about the classes that I saw offered on your website. Is that a thing?
It is a thing.
Because I couldn't tell. I went to go look like I was going to put it in the cart, but then I didn't know what it was that I was buying.
Basically, it's, people have been asking me for years to teach a class. So, I have the book that kind of focuses on the 5 things that I think are the biggest health priorities, and then really how to implement them. But what's interesting with the classes, if you look at essential oil research, I actually think topical application, putting it on the skin, is the most effective. But the research says otherwise because it's looking for how quickly does it get into the bloodstream. So if you're drinking it and gets into the blood faster than if you put it on the skin. But if you're putting it on reflex points, like acupuncture points, it actually has kind of like an immediate effect. And so there are really easy ways. I mean, for everything that we have going on, like allergy attacks, constipation, nausea, fatigue, all of these things, I'm really kind of sharing, this is what I see in practice, and then this is the research to back it up. It's like parenting. Did you get your best parenting advice from other friends who had kids or your pediatrician or book? It's always other friends. It's people that are out there on the front lines that are like, hey, baby powder gets sand off your kid's feet. So your knee isn't sandy. And you're like, great tip. I'm keeping that,
Yeah, totally. And so what are your goals with the business? Like, where are you now and where are you trying to take this?
I've exceeded 1 million, which was my first big goal. And it's really interesting because, you start to realize that at a certain point, I now have like 20 people on my team. Bigger is not less work. And so I'm really trying to be very thoughtful. I think my biggest goal is just helping people. It's really horrible to have to go through kind of awful things and not really feel like you have a good roadmap. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on putting together a resilience roadmap, the things that I found really helpful, so that if, someone else stumbles into yuck in their life, they at least have, not only some advice, but, I really wanted to know that someone had kind of survived something like this and come out the other end. I wanted to have hope. I wanted to know it was possible.
Well, I think that you are an incredible inspiration in that way. I'm curious who's a support for you, because I know you're a support for so many other people. Where do you find strength outside of, you've got the tools in your toolbox, including obviously the essential oils. but what about other humans to depend on? Because you're alone, you know, trying to parent your daughter through this and just getting through it all.
Well, she's incredible. I mean, yeah, your kids kind of remind me of that. She just, she's so funny and she's hilarious. So she's a great support. My mom is amazing and really fantastic. And she's really, I've watched, you know, cause she lost, her grandson and then my dad died within 6 months. And
Oh,
so
I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
no, but she's really, I'm so impressed by her, you know, because she's really kind of found a new way to navigate and show up. I'm very lucky. I mean, like you, I have some amazing girlfriends who mostly make me laugh. I really think laughter is just the best medicine. So
By far, I couldn't agree more. And so my ultimate question for you, Jody, is what fuels you? What's your ultimate fuel? Like what gets you out of bed in the morning?
um, I really like the idea of making the world a better place, you know, than I found it. And basically helping other people kind of traverse hard things and not have to do as much trial and error. Like just really helping people kind of feel better, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, I hope there's lots of people listening and they're going to get such a treat from hearing your story and from getting their own tools. I'm sure that they'll want to come to you as like an expert and buy the book, buy the oils. And, you know, I know that your measurement of it is not like, oh, let's get to the 10 million or 20 million, but that will be how you measure like how many people are actually benefiting from all the work that you've done to research this remedy. It's incredible.
Thank you. Well, and I do have a free gift, boostthebrainbook.com/gift. It's 25 ways that you can activate your vagus nerve. And here's the cool thing. You only need to pick one, you know, it's just like one little thing that you add to your day.
Wait, so what is it? Where am I going to get the free gift?
Boostthebrainbook/gift. And it's a bonus chapter, but you know, it's a lot of things people don't think of. Like if you can sleep on your right side, that kind of helps activate your nervous system better. If you use your tongue like a paintbrush and paint the roof of your mouth, that helps to activate your vagus nerve. You know, it's just a lot of little things that I'm like, oh, this, you know, when you're in chronic pain and something alleviates that pain, you're like, oh, I'm keeping that one, you know?
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. What a great resource. So glad that you were on the podcast. Great to see you. And if there's anything that I can do for you, just thrilled to and really happy to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.